This is Daryl Angler. I'm an Umpqua fly designer, and we're hanging out at Trouts today tying some carp bugs. What are we tying, you ask? How about a little Detroit Mop City love? Oh, whether it's the river or Stillwater, this bad boy will produce. Come on. Hey, welcome. We're going to tie some flies today. I'm Daryl Angler of Nervous Water Flies. I'm an ambassador for Vicuña Dubbing, and I am a Umpqua fly designer. That's a mouthful. We're going to tie a couple carp flies throughout the series here, and this is the Detroit Mop City. And mop flies are very popular in our community. So why not have one that kind of promotes silhouette and provokes fish to eat based on that silhouette? So one of our focuses will be foreshore, tail to head, a big gnarly grub with this specific pattern. You'll notice that I've got something different in the vise here. This is an owner hook. It's their wacky hook for bass. There's a very, very distinct reason I'm using this hook, and I can't emphasize more to find something like this that gives you the soft 90 at the top. You'll notice coming off here, right there, that soft 90 allows us to build the body up and then literally turn it, meaning the hook's not curved, so we don't have a slow arc of a body. The body's gonna go up and then turn on that build. So we're really, really gonna get a pronounced half arc within the body as it comes back around. And that's the goal, again, is to have something tapered in a half moon, like a grub is gonna look. So this specific hook is gonna give us that soft 90 and allows us to build the body up and really stack those shoulders up to give us that water push and the silhouette that we're gonna really desire once it's done. So this fly is gonna be just one thread. We're gonna do 140 the entire time. If you wanna go to 240 or go to something bigger just for the eyes, feel free. But do know that you wanna go back down to the 140 once you get to the body, just to make sure that we don't get too bulky in our silhouette. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is about a 5mm thread stack. And what we're doing is prepping the hook shank for a pair of lead eyes that we want to not slide around. I think that if we provide more girth on our hook shank, it's gonna come across more logically that, yeah, we can actually affix one skinny item to another skinny item and have more security. So instead of putting our brass lead middle to a hook shank or just a little bit of thread, we've got some oomph to that thread base now, or that hook shank, and we're gonna be able to really cinch in our eyes. Now I will say this, one little tip, if you do that, don't go crazy. You don't want it lifted over the shank, because then your lead eyes are gonna roll forward or backwards on you. There's a trick in some of the bigger flies, bucktail deceivers that I tie, that if I really want to bump, I can tie 2 bumps and then put my eyes in the middle, or my material bump in the middle of those two, and they kind of sit. This is the opposite. We're just tying a bar of thread around the hook shank and going in the middle of that. If you do make it too high or too much, it can get unstable. So we're tying this with medium lead eyes. Okay, this is going to be the bigger version of the Detroit Mop City. The DMC is also tied in a junior, basically, where I just take this owner hook. This is a size 4. I'll knock it down, or I'm sorry, a size 2. I'll knock it down to the 4, and we'll go with small lead eyes. And that is a much better Stillwater offering because of less weight and less splash. So we're going to tie these eyes in how I tie everything in. Doesn't matter if it's got a lift kit. It doesn't matter if it's bead chain, micro lead, large lead. I am X-wrap 3 to 4 times or 4 to 5 times, X-wrap 4 to 5 times, and we're going to go under the eye, over the shank 3 or 4 times, and we'll reverse it. Once you do this process, it's literally like getting up and walking to the fridge and getting something to drink. You don't say, I'm gonna stand up, I'm gonna put my left foot out, my right foot out, we don't do that until we know what we're doing. We build these mini systems and go off that. You just think the thought and you go. So once you tie this in with this process a handful of times, it's just gonna be your go-to for secure eyes, and you won't have to think about this, that, under, over, under, over. You're just gonna do it in those phases. Once you get the system down, you'll notice that you'll do the system once, you'll apply a little bit of glue, and then you'll do the system again, and our eyes will be done. So we're gonna do the same thing with the eyes. They're gonna be perpendicular to the hook shank. We do not wanna have them tied into where they're way over here or way over there, because that means we're gonna have to wrench them back with the thread even farther. And that's how we're gonna move our eyes. We wanna move them with the thread. Can't stress that enough. We don't wanna move the eyes. I've seen a lot of tyers at times, they just, by habit, I don't think it's on purpose, I just think it's habit. My eyes are crooked and I can just move them with my hand. The problem there is that we've put all these tight wraps to secure our eye to the hook shank, and then you move it, and when you move it, you've now stretched all the thread wraps that you put down, loosening all those wraps, and then you can put tight wraps on top of that. You'll move it, and then you're gonna have two different stages of wraps that aren't as tight as they were when you first started. And then the eye just isn't gonna have a chance. So keeping things tight from the get-go all the way up and consistently tight with your technique is just a big part of keeping things secure with your eyes. It's getting a hand with some glue, but it really does come down to thread technique and approach to making sure that everything is in secured and tight. You wouldn't loosen the laces on the bottom part of your shoe and then go to the top and tighten it. So make sure everything's tight from the bottom of your shoe all the way up, and then you lace it up and you'll be good to go. So I'm only moving with the thread. So you can see there, they're cattywampus. I'm gonna straighten them out. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a few wraps in there. I'm gonna pull in line. You know, I'm a big fan of this. I like to pull in line. I'm not a fan of the 90 because we're just gonna pretty much weaken our signal flow here. So I'm gonna support my eyes so I don't move them accidentally, and I'm gonna give it a tug, and that's it. That's all we really need is that little bit of tug. We're wrapping rather tightly here. So I've got some X wraps in there, and now I'm gonna do my over-unders. So it's gonna be my under-overs, under the eye, over the shank, and we'll do that 3 or 4 times. And then again, in line, support your eyes, and give it a little cinch. And then we're gonna go literally direct, because we're already over the hook shank. Just lift up your bobbin and go over. And we're gonna pull a U-E, and we're gonna go the same thing, over your shanks and under your eyes, in line, support your eyes and give it a tug. Under the eye, over the eye, and we're back in business. I'm gonna unwrap and show you again, okay? We just finished our over-under in reverse, but we can't do a normal wrap because it's gonna unwrap. Under the eye, over the eye, and we're back going forward. Now, we have got tight cinch wraps on our X wraps, and we've got the interlocking wraps going over and under our shank and eyes. It's not perfect, but it's close to perfect. So we're gonna add some water-based Loon glue, and what we want is enough, I'll let you see that, we want enough to where it's sinking in to the hook and not just puddling on the top. I think it's imperative that we know as a tyer that this glue is puddling because it's now saturated all the thread that there to saturate. Same with the top. There's just no more thread to go. Don't wipe that off. We're gonna go ahead and finish wrapping. Now you see, I just did that was the whole series. X wraps, over-unders, and reverse. So once you get that process, that's what you're stacking. It's not X wraps and then this. Look at that as just one unit of execution. So you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna X wrap, over, under, over, cinch, and that's one phase. And now what I've done now is I've got 2 of those phases. I've got one on the bottom and one on the top. And you can see now that my glue is not puddled, but it's just damp. So all the thread that I'm adding now is gonna absorb what I have left over. Okay? So 3 stacks, X wraps, cinches, and then the glue in between them. And that is pretty darn stout. When this dries, it's even better. So if I'm batching these out, if I'm tying 6, 12, sometimes 5 dozen, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do 2 stages on the front end. I'm gonna go ahead and I tie the eyes off and I let them dry, and then I come back and I do the tails. And the reason why is because I like to get these eyes dried. So basically super, super, super durable. I can still go on, it's gonna dry by the end, and heck, I've even fished them that quick. But like with anything, a time cure is gonna improve it. And that's with most glues, except for your activator-based CA glues. So now that our eyes are built, we're gonna basically get some thread wraps to the back and get to our tail. So I don't really have a measurement here, but let me show you. If I turn this that way, so where we're building now is kind of up on top, you'll see that I'm almost in the middle. You want to be just shy of the middle. Like if I'm looking at that as like from our bend to the bend, is right there, is right about the middle. I'm going to back that off because you're going to eat up that space already when you tie your tail in. So knowing that the tail is going to eat up some space, back it off a little bit, and then when you cinch, you're going to go back on that spot with a bulky tail. So we're going to do the tail of our mop. Now you can go out and you can go to bathroom aisles, go to kitchen aisles, and there's all kinds of bath mats and stuff, that toy aisles sometimes, stuffed animal aisles, that you can find various materials to use for your mop and colors. I personally have not had success with other colors. That doesn't mean anything. That's my sample pool here in Colorado, so knock yourself out. Try some different colors. I'm sure that they're all gonna provide some fish to the net. We're gonna have to burn this down and shape it, so you want to have your fingers behind, resting on the eyes, and have the tip of your mop fly come back to where that last end bends, and that's going to give you enough, basically full body, to tie in and trim. All right, so what I've done now is I've actually a couple wraps on the top here, right? And then I've lifted up and jammed a few underneath. And again, I'm a big advocate of making sure that when we're tying something in, we're tying it in where it's going to stay. It's not going to get knocked around or spun. If I didn't go under and put those two jam wraps in there, it's just affixed, even with good wraps, but it's only affixed to the top of the shank with wraps hitting it one direction. So this fly gets into a mouth. I've got a 15, 20 pound fish. Things are going to move around. I don't need this to come back and now me have to like always adjust my tail back, because if I had to move it back, that means it could be that way once it's in the water and I don't know it. So you quickly learn as a tyer to kind of find ways to make sure that you're doing things the durable way, to make sure that this fly goes to bat for you when you need it to go bat for you, So I will secure it with those wraps on the top, and I'm going to lift it up and put my jam wraps in there. Then we don't want all this excess material on our body. You know, I did learn to tie flies, tying trout flies, and the one thing that has not escaped me is being aware of how much material we're wrapping, where we're wrapping it, thread wraps, all those little tiny things that basically will exponentially add up to silhouette, which I'm a big advocate of. Got a lot of crazy flies in the carp world, and a lot of them, you could argue why a fish is even eating them for that point. So I think silhouette lends a very large amount of weight to the whole equation. So as I pull off and out all the extra material that was on that, then I'll go back and secure our tail where we want it. And I can always pick it up and make sure that I know that I'm happy with where that's hitting, okay? Now my hook is angled differently, so it's very easy to look at this and go, oh, it's barely down. But if I put it back where it's straight, you can see that it's significantly down the back hook of that shank, allowing us to have room to come up that turn and build the body. So you don't want to go any farther than that, because if you start going too much farther, what's going to happen is you're going to limit the amount of space that you're going to have from here to where the material's tied in. Luckily, this is a very stout hook and great hookup ratio and sharp point. All right, wrap up to the front, half hitch, and now we're going to shape our tail. The goal when we're shaping our tail is to taper from the middle to the end. If we start getting too crazy with the lighter, you're going to have to unfortunately retie your tail. So if you go quick and easy, and slowly rather, I'm sorry, slowly and easy, you're going to be successful. Also, you want your flame to be like this. You don't want to go in like this because the flame's going to go up and you're not going to have control. So if you have your flame kind of parallel, you can almost kiss the tail with your flame and taper it out. And I'll show you precisely that. Also, you can use a Bic, smaller lighter. I have found that the one with the longer doesn't get hot. Of course, I'm also tying 5 and 6 dozen of these at a time, and the lighter gets hot after a few. But I do like the longer lighter. So I'm going to get my flame just about all the way up, and I'm just going to kiss it all the way around, and I'm going to taper my fly. It's not a drastic change. All we're looking to do is kind of work a visual taper to the end of the fly, okay? Luckily, the particular material I'm using, you get, if you can see them, here we go. So you get some segmentation after you heat it up because of the way that this actual material is tied together. So the segmentation is ancillary and not planned, but I'll take it as an extra for sure. And that's what we're looking for right there. So we want to make sure that we've got a very grub-esque tail coming off of that bad boy. So when it's just looked at, there's just nothing else but yum on their mind. So there you go. That is our tail. And that works with any mop material. Be very careful with your lighter. It'll take you a few to get used to it, but you're really just kissing the edges from about the middle to the tip out to basically get your taper. We're going to reattach some 140 thread where we left off, and we're going to jump into our dubbing loop now. So dubbing loops, this is another physical dubbing loop, so this will be 2 times around. So it'll be a double dubbing loop. We're going to cross over 2 times, thread up, and then cinch down. We're going to still attach our thread to the top. Now, I guarantee there's some logical cats out there saying, but dude, you've got lead eyes. It doesn't matter if it's on the side or the top. You're right, it doesn't, because the lead eyes are going to override it. But if I have a different mentality or a different way of thinking on that dubbing loop for this fly, that means I have to reassess and think the right way for another fly. So whatever I have to do to trick myself to do it the right way, I just do it the same way every time to every fly, regardless of what I'm using the weight-wise. And that way, no matter what, it's always on the top. So knock yourself out. If you want to put it on the inside, you totally can. The lead eyes are not going to be affected. The weight of the fly won't be affected. That's just my own mind. Okay, I'm half hitched up top here. We've got our bobbin out of the way, and we're going to go ahead and build our loop. We're going to get our dubbing loop spinner. I do like a spinner like this rather than that. Just for me, they kind of end up everywhere, and they're a pain in the butt. But grab whatever your dubbing loop spinner is, and we are going to build some dubbing. So this is roughly a 6-inch loop, and it'll shrink down to closer to 5. And the reason it has to be a pretty big loop is because we are going to have a little extra wrapped on this end for the turn, and this isn't wrapped successfully where they're next to each other to where a short dubbing loop will cover that much body. When you've got so much to cover and we're building it up and building it up and building it up to where we get shoulders and mass without weight, you're going to have some more dubbing loop to go around and some more material. This will change. If you've tuned in and watched the wakame salad video, thank you. What I did is I kept it all the way up to the back of the eye. This is going to have a change halfway. When we get past that turn, we're going to go from stacking the wraps on top of each other to wrapping them just in front of each other. And we want to reverse our taper is why. We're going to taper up and build up. And then we want to relax that so it tapers back down to the eyes. If we keep going up, we're going to build shoulders up, and we're just going to have a taper to a big body in the head. But we want it to taper down a little bit. We want it to have the illusion that whatever's happening with whatever this is, that it's definitely tapered on both ends. And that's the illusion we want to give. Granted, these eyes aren't normally going to be on a grub, and it's not going to be as hairy, but again, there's a level of exaggeration in all flies. Just a little more, perhaps, at times with carp. So we're going to go ahead and get some dubbing set up in our loop here. And again, thanks for watching that wakame salad video if you did. If you haven't, head over after this one. But it's the same thing. I'm going to take dubbing loop and stack it with dubbing that we have pre-proed to do what we want it to do. This is the MS Nymph dub from Fly Tyer's Dungeon. I have mixed in a little bit of my Carp dub from Vicuña in here, the Unibrown, as well as a little Nature's Spirit, and then I've added some cream legs just to kind of bring everything back up and settle the tones down. It was a little brassy, so by adding some of the brown and the tan, it brought back some of those natural tones that I wanted. So you're just going to do the same thing that we did with the other dubbing, and this is great with any wily or crazy dubbing that you have, even on a smaller scale. If I'm doing a dubbing loop with semi-seal for a small trout bug, you could take the same dubbing in a smaller amount and just stack it and stack it and stack it after pulling it and just try and get the majority of all those fibers going the same direction. That's the goal. Just get them for the most part going in the same direction. So I have a dubbing loop here. I usually do this in 2 halves. I'll grab half and see where it's going to come off. It's come off right there. Cool. And a lot of times, I'm not going to do it now because you can't see it. But my habit is I will go from the dubbing loop to where it is, and I tell you this because you're going to have systems when you're working with so much dubbing that you're going to want a tip here or there to find out where you need to get until you get your own systems. So dubbing loops in that 6-inch range are a little unruly at times to deal with and control. So a few tips. We're going to go back and do the same thing. We're going to do a little bit of wax. I was a little heavy here. I'm going to go and pick that up. I don't want globs, so I'm going to pick that up with the actual glue itself or the wax itself. So when I pick this up at home, I'm going to do that here. What I would normally do is I would pick this up and I rest it on my leg and straighten it out with one hand and then pick up and go. And I think the reason I do that is it's a little lower and I can see the perspective is a little easier for me versus up on my bench. But you can see once it's all stacked together, you can just pretty much grab what you need. And we're going to place it at the top of our dubbing loop. All right, there's one. And we're going to come over, we're going to grab the next stretch. And I can see that it wants to break about right there. All right, so we're going to take this and we're going to put it right behind that. Now this dubbing loop is going to look gnarly at times, which is why we have to kind of set ourselves up for success on each phase. I'm not asking you to make sure that this material is perfectly left, right, straight back. It's not. I'll show you it's not. We want the majority of it to be that way though, because we need to kind of have success twisting it or it's just not going to work out. You'll also see that because it's got so many different materials in here, that the core right now is a mess. And that's normal because there's so many legs and material in my dubbing loop. So my overall goal at this phase is to make sure that how the dubbing lays in my loop is even on both sides of the thread going up the middle of the loop. So when I look at my loop, I'm more concerned with where is the thread and how much of material is coming out on both sides of that thread. I'll deal with the clumps once we spin it, but right now I need it even and going the right direction. So when I do spin this, I have a chance to actually clean it up. Now, this guy right here, that is a problem lump. All of these here we can deal with. Everything's pretty much straight. It'll spin up fine. It'll pick out and brush out fine. But knowing that I've done enough of these loops here and tied enough of these flies, I know that this right here is going to be a problem. So you can do a couple things. I'll come in, and the first non-invasive way to go about it is just take your bodkin and see if you can just kind of nudge it around, thin it out, pull a little in, pull a little out, up or down, and see what you can do. Now, I've already thinned that out a little bit. You can see already that's not one big dark clump of dubbing. It's already been fanned out. That I can work with. So now that I got even dubbing on both sides, I'm going to come up on that, just like the Wakame dubbing loop, right? I'm going to pinch behind it. And we're going to preload and spin and spin. And we got this thing ready to fire off. One last double check. Am I happy with things are laying? I can make any adjustment I need to right now to make sure that when it goes, it fires off. And there we go. Okay, you let go and you kind of pull back on your dubbing loop and things tighten up. So the instinct here is to grab your bodkin and start picking. But all those legs are tied down, if you start going in with a bodkin and moving them, things are going to move around and get discombobulated, and now all of a sudden maybe uneven, maybe a whole patch of dubbing comes out, and now your loop's got an empty spot in it, and now you're cutting it off and starting over. So to prevent that loop from breaking down or going anywhere or doing what you don't want it to do, know that those rubber legs, it's not just material. If this were just material, we can certainly pick that out, but we're talking rubber legs. And not just rubber legs, we're talking about like rubber legs, very, very fine. They're probably wrapped around that thing a gazillion times. You're just not gonna pick it out. So we have to take steps to get this set up to where if we do need to pick it out, we can do so without destroying our dubbing loop. So my first way of doing this is always the brush, and it's always an east-west approach. I'm not gonna go in it up, down. I'm gonna go back and forth and maybe a little diagonal, but for the most part, back and forth. And then I'll also dig in like that and then pull out. This brass is just gonna eat up every leg. It's just gonna catch. So this is a good thing to kind of unpick most of this loop. And you'll see that just brushing this out, I'm gonna go ahead and get most of this bad boy where it needs to be. And that's not, we want it to stay where it's gonna stay. And I don't want to overspin it in the beginning. If I overspin it in the beginning, nothing is going to want to come undone. So now that I've got this kind of with a brush, I'll go back in, another spin. I don't need to get too crazy with it. That's like adding a pinch of salt, right? You're making something, you taste it, you add a pinch of salt. You don't add all the salt you need because over time, that salt's going to get stronger or it may be more pronounced. So a little spin, a little salt. You go back in, you kind of brush and see what you have. Now, for argument's sake here, I'm going to say that we've got something in here that we want to use the next level of picking on. Now, I will say that if I do a bodkin on any of my flies, it's literally just to go in and to see if the loop is allowing me to do it. There's no way in the world that I can go in there and do this if it's not allowing me to do it. So if I can go in and I can pick these legs out and they're actually not that bad and they're coming out, beauty, we're winning. You're good. However, this section down here is not coming undone and it's got give, meaning I'm getting legs and I'm getting that. And I don't want to have to force that. If I force this, you're going to mess with the substructure of your dubbing loop. You're moving the core of your dubbing loop. So if you go through and it just picks out, great. Any resistance, we're going to bring in our next tool, and that's the X-Acto knife. Take a new blade, make some cuts and some foam, and just take the new edge off of your X-Acto. You go in with a sharp X-Acto and take it from me. I've picked off of enough of these. It's not the end of the world, right? You're clean, you just cut it off and you redo a loop and you reload. But it's 5 minutes, and if you're tying 5 dozen, 5 minutes is a long time. But if you're only tying up a few for yourself and you pick it, it's not a big deal. All you have to do is undo it, pull all this dubbing out, restack a new loop and get going. But you can prevent that by going parallel and dulling your X-Acto just a touch. So we're gonna go in and we're gonna go straight down this and we're gonna pick out the areas in a downward motion and pulling out. So now this bodkin, which is really an X-Acto, when we get the give and we pull out, the blade is gonna cut that leg or those legs right where they are captured. Not gonna move them, they're gonna be busted open where they're captured. So we know now that the integrity of our dubbing loop, how we put it in there, is gonna stay. So don't work on these things with the knife to get it out. Go in there with the X-Acto knife, loosen up the spot, then come back with your brush and clean it up. And you'll see, like my core now, what I'm really looking for is a consistent core all the way through here. Material's gonna kind of build up and get pulled back, okay? But what we're looking for is that inside core to be pretty consistent. So again, we're wrapping the same amount of material around all sides of the shank equally. And this will be the same kind of wrap as before. We're gonna start this wrap, pulling our materials back and wrapping with our pressure going back, meaning we're on top of these wraps to build bodies. So our first wrap is there. You can see I'm way back. I am on top of that bad boy. All right. Pull back, on top. These are going to be a little bit of a pain in the beginning. until you figure out how you're gonna control some of this material, okay? So once I get to the top of that turn, I'll pull it back, I'll get my brush, and I'm gonna go ahead and do a quick brush with what I've laid down to make sure that they don't get trapped. All right, now, as we get to the transition on our 90 to make that turn, in that turn, as our dubbing loop wraps through that, when we get to the top of that turn, we're gonna transition from this to that. And what I did there is I went from having the pressure of my dubbing loop back this way to where we're building mass. Again, this is a streamer, build mass, no weight trick. I wanna build mass, I want water push, but I don't want a lot of weight. So I've got a very sparse dubbing loop. I'm building this right on top of each other, so we're getting the shoulders built up so we get water push. That water push is gonna vibrate back down the rest of the body of the fly. So this is 100% a streamer body trick that we're just gonna shrink down and employ on a carp design. So when I get to that, I'm gonna turn. So my last couple going this way will now shift to where I go straight up and down, still pulling my material back, but because we're now wrapping inside of each other, rather than on top of each other, you can already see that it already looks like there's not as much material there because we went from this to that. So you can build in some taper with a dubbing loop without having to taper your material in your dubbing loop, which is another trick in another video. But yes, you can do that 100%, build in your taper. This is a little quick way to do it and a good way to learn how to control shape with a dubbing loop. I cinch this down the same way, one on that side, one on that side, and I'm gonna go through and I take my scissors and I open them up and I use the inside to scrape up anything. Don't go in and squeeze, just go in and get enough of it to where you can kind of pull up on your material, all right? And as we do that, what we're doing is we're just kind of getting a good spot to clip off so we don't have a bunch of extra material hanging out in that spot, all right? Now, I think every tire does that, right? We finish something and we just wrap. I don't know why, we just do that. I took a class with George Daniels and he said that it was a streamer class. And he says that he's never met an angler that hasn't or still doesn't do this, where you cast everything out and then you pull more line out of your reel. It's like, why do we do that? We just pulled everything out. We just sent it out as far as we wanted. It landed where I wanted it to land. Why am I pulling more out? So I think by habit, we end up doing things just as a creature comfort. And creature comfort, when I'm on the rivers, I want a little bit of play and line at the end of it. So I do it by habit. Same thing here. I finish tying something off and I'll give it a couple spins. I have gotten into the habit of knowing that and backing it off a couple times if I really want, you know? So let's go ahead and put a half in there. And the reason I like to do that is because when I have to kind of unpick a fly or trim a fly, the half hitch, I can do this all day and it's not going to unwind. If I don't, it's going to unwrap or wrap and I don't know what's going on. With this, I know that I can unwrap to my hitch and it's going to stop right there and it's not going anywhere. And that's the stopping point. So no matter what I do, I'm not worried about unwrapping what I just secured. So the half hitch can help out just to kind of keep things together while you're working on a fly as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick out our fly, all the magic, right? All this work, right? We straightened out our dubbing prior to actually getting it out and laid it out. We got the right distance, so we knew we had enough dubbing to work with. We transferred our well-stacked dubbing, gravity still works, to our dubbing loop, which was set up with a little bit of wax. That's gonna hold our dubbing loop while we really work on it and move it around. We made sure our dubbing loop was straight, even. So when we do twist it, we can go in and pick it out with the right tools by not making things all cattywampus and moved around. So we did all that work to get it on here. We owe it to the rest of the fly to kind of finish up with the same mentality. So it's very easy just to wrap this bad boy up and let it go, right? It's leggy dubbing. It's a carp fly, why not? Well, sometimes things look better dressed up, right? Will that catch fish? Yes. But the performance of this fly for you as an angler is where things will get kind of wonky. We've got quite a bit of material that's just kind of everywhere. It may be equidistant around the hook shank, but there's just a lot going on. In particular, underneath the hook gap. So this specific fly does have a pretty lively body. It's just trimmed. Think of someone has long hair. It's not dreads, but it's long hair, and they've trimmed it. They once a year they get it cut. I used to have long hair like down to here, and my wife told me that the only rule is it can't be longer than mine. So once a year I went in and cut a couple inches off and put it back in a ponytail. That's kind of what we're doing. I didn't let it go all crazy and get dreaded out. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I've been to my share of shows. That happens after a few weeks. But we want this cleaned up. We want this to have an organized look to it, something that has intent, so we know that it's not just kind of crazy. It has something that's possibly real out there. So we're going to trim this back down. And we're going to start with the same way that we did the wakame salad, or any dubbing loop with legs, is that we need to clear out all of this matter and debris underneath. Remember the angle that we tied up, right? If you have, do I have anything I can curve? Wrapping on the top, you've got all kinds of room. But the bottom, there's less space. So all those stacks that we wrapped up are now on the other. So we have way more material in a shorter space underneath that hook than we do on top, just because there's less space on the underside of that curve. So if we go in and part, as in like part your hair, we part this fly to where I'm going to go ahead and brush down the sides and then brush the middle up. You can get a steel brush at a fly shop. You can get them at a hardware store. I have both. I bought one at the fly shop, and then I saw a pack of 8 of these in brass, plastic, and stainless steel. So if you don't want to get one with fly design, just go to the hardware shop and pick one of these up. I cannot stress enough how versatile a brass brush can be, just because it's like your brush. I really like it when I get these. Some people are like thinking that's bad. What this does now is my brush now has a very specific spot that I can go in now and carve out what I need to carve out. I don't need another smaller, it's in one. So you're going to get these abnormalities, use them to your advantage. It very well could work, but I can tell you right now that I'm going to be bummed out if I ever lose this, because I like the way these have bent up that way, and I use them a lot to make sure that I get what I need under the eye, or I'm getting something in a specific spot. So doesn't matter where you get it, but get yourself some of these, because they're a very, very valuable tool to have in your arsenal. Okay, let's make some space in this fly. So I've got things parted out, and as you can see, there is quite a bit of material underneath this fly. I am going to do the same thing that I do in all my flies. The angle, not the location, but the angle will be met from the eye to the hook point. So when I cut, that's my angle. And I usually cut just above the eye, just about right there, just so the hook point isn't necessarily covered, but not out there naked. We don't like saying, hey, look at me kind of thing. We want to make sure that it's blending at best, because that whole hook point thing in fish, I can't argue against it. I don't know what it is about hook points in fish, but they see that and they tend to not want to eat. So nice, right? Now, here's one little tip that no matter what you're tying, if you're wrapping a dubbing loop, you're going to want to pay attention to this and possibly employ it on your next fly. All of this material on the underside of this fly is now jammed up there. So what we're going to get is we got too much material up against the hook shank, and it's not going to lay naturally. You can already see that it's already bunching up and crisscrossing because it doesn't know where to go, because there's nowhere for it to go. And you get this kind of log jam of material. And at the end of the day, we want nothing getting in the way of our hook point or our hook gap. When we get an eat, we want to make sure that we've got the space that we're allotted when we get that hook. It's my job as a tyer to make sure that I'm not taking that away from you. So yeah, we did trim away the angle and we've got that hook point covered and that looks natural, but we still need to make room to allow the front part of this material to lay down. So if you pull it up, you can kind of see where it all lays down. All right, because you don't want to go in there just blind and start cutting, because all of a sudden, crap, I've cut too much off, and that's not going to be fun. You don't want to get this far into the fly and then have to undo it. That would really stink. So the guide that I go with for starters is the barb. If I can go up to the barb, no farther than the barb into that hook point, because then you're starting to get to the point to where there's not enough material to naturally allow things to lay down. So I can go in there and I can look, and my barb by habit, not on purpose, but just by habit, is usually right in front of where I bite with these flies. So my vise grabs right behind the hook, behind the barb. So I just know by most times when I double check, it's always there. So I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna pull all that material up. This right here is the most awful offender, that right there. We love that part of the material on this side of the fly, but it's bad news on the underside. So that's the first one that I'm gonna go in, and I'm gonna cut that out of there. So you can already see we're already creating some room. Not enough though, I'm gonna take one more layer. If you ease into this cut, you're just not gonna cut too much out. So I would advise just take a couple extra minutes to kind of look at it, make sure that the fly material is parted correctly and that you're happy with what you're taking out. You know, you can always sit there and pull it up and kind of like pull that back and go, all right, I'm good with that, you know? But I think easing into it and cutting a little bit of it at a time will allow you to kind of edge into that, you know, you ease into it rather than getting right at it. Once you're good, we're just gonna brush it back and then the whole fly will get trimmed down before we finish it up. And now you can see that we went from a completely gnarly fly to a very controlled and succinct fly. So when the material is breathing underwater, it's gonna come up, it's gonna be moving under the hook point, but it's not gonna be interfering with the hook point. And even better than that, when it lays down it's in a fish's mouth, we don't have a bunch of material filling up that last part of the hook gap. All right, so the trim job on this is literally gonna be a touch-up, right? We don't want all this craziness. See how, like, if I were to look at this, I don't see it round. I see 90s in there. I see this is a 90 with, I've got legs over here, and this corner here is like just not round enough. So by going around it, what we're really looking to do is to reinforce that fusiform body and just take out some of the rough edges that we've wrapped in that just kind of happen to be there. It's completely round. I'm not saying I see straight edges, but there are some 90s. You tires know what I mean, especially streamers, which is where I picked it up. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the angle of that again, and I'm gonna kind of go around and just soften that angle as I have to get all of our ancillary kind of cattywampus legs and material out. And again, ease into this. You don't, I mean, I've done it. I've gotten fast, I've come in and you cut a chunk out. That's, you can't recover from that. That's one of those things where I take a stop, take a deep breath, I go make a beverage, I come back and I go at it again. It's just gonna happen. Go slow. Also, there's two ways to cut. This is the most forgiving way to cut. This is a with the material, with the grain cut. So you're not gonna take out the majority of your materials this way if you pay attention to what you're doing, because it's a with the grain cut. What I mean by that is if I were to turn around and make cuts this way, which you can do, way more drastic of a cut, way more drastic of an approach because you're going against the grain. So once my tied off and I have flies and I'm like looking at something and I'm going to, if I'm gonna trim this way, I am 100% making sure that I know what I'm trimming, what I wanna trim and how I'm gonna trim it, because that will be a cut that I can't replace or hide because it's against the grain. Whereas if I have a miscut this way, you know, and I go too far, immediately it may not be that bad. I may be able to go in and brush it and go, oh, all right, cool. It happened to be laying funky and I miscut and we're okay. But you go against the grain in that cut and you're gonna have, you need to have real intentional cuts. So I'm gonna go around and I'm gonna do the front half of the fly that way to where now it just kind of looks nice and fusiform. I like having some action on the tail end of this fly. However, I do like it to be organized. So I'm gonna take the 90s off here and here. All right, and I went at this angle for that front half, and I'm gonna reverse it and take that angle on the, so I don't have a square. We have the top and the bottom of our hook shank, we have the sides. In between those, that's where those 90s are gonna lay, right? So I have the top of my hook shank and I have the side of my hook shank. That little eighth of a section right there is where those 90s are gonna lay. And the same thing in streamers, when you're building bodies and you're looking at it, you know that fish don't look like that. So you trim away those 90s and you get more of a fusiform fish body or a bug body. I said fish because it was a streamer. So by knowing those, I can go in and cut off what I see as those hard 90s, those transitions from the top of the fly to the side of the fly. So again, I've trimmed this fly, but I need to reiterate, it's leggy dubbing. I didn't take anything away from it. Because of the inherent movement that this is already going to have, all we've done is control the movement. It's not just Wiley, inflatable wacky man, that guy he's not the inflatable wacky man kind of guy. This needs to be controlled because once this gets wet, it needs to breathe and undulate over our tail. It doesn't need to be kind of look at me. I'm not a really look at me kind of thing, although the hipster doofus can be qualified as a look at me fly. We want this to breathe. And because of there's so many different vibrations with the smaller legs and the synthetic material, that this is going to breathe when it gets wet. Looks phenomenal. I'm telling you, like some of this really, really fine stuff looks more like fur when it gets wet. And that's one of the reasons I liked mixing the vicuña in there, is I get some translucency mixed in with that fur look by combining a couple different dubbings. It's like cooking. You know, if you can cook, you can mix dubbing. So the only thing I'm going to trim are some random long legs. I'm happy with how that looks. I'm happy with how it's laying. Every once in a while, you're going to get some random long legs or hairs on a really gnarly bug. I'm okay with some of these longer ones coming down. That's perfect. 2 more stages here, and then she's fishable. We're going to put on a hackle feather, and then we're going to touch dub, because I like touch dubs. So, you know what? That was too small. So the hackle feather is an interpretation thing, okay? And I say interpretation because fish in one place may like it, fish in another may not want that. And when I say that, I mean the added vibration or the added mottled addition. What I'm looking for is a contrast with my hand hackle and the body that I'm tying. If I'm tying this in an olive, which I do, I have a variant that I tie in olive, it doesn't get this hen hackle feather. It's going to get something in a darker olive to really contrast the lighter olive body. Or if I have something in chartreuse, I'll do that as well. But I really look for a contrast in color going to the head. I like the way really mottled feathers look when you wrap them. When you break all of these models up, it looks lifelike. And what we're looking to add is another layer of what a bug looks like. You know, another maybe to the equation. So all I'm going to do is pull back and get that bad boy kind of separated like that. And we are going to tie this in like you would tie any other hackle feather with a trout fly. Several warm water flies, you could tie them in this way. I'm doing the opposite, and I know this is going to contradict my taper philosophy, but I just don't like the way it looks the other way. If I tie it in this way, you would think logically it works with my approach on the taper, right? Because I have the bigger feathers first getting wrapped, and then getting smaller as I go up, and that would lead into that. But when I do that, it doesn't lay the way I want it to lay over the body, and it just didn't give me the eye test that I wanted. So when I flipped it around and started tying the smaller feathers here and the larger feathers up top, it laid better. And I think the reason being is because I didn't have these longer feathers pushing up over the smaller feathers and almost providing a ramp. So by switching it, and that may not be it. It may just be what looks good to me. You know, if you want to tie it the other way, knock yourself out. But I will say this will lay down a little better to the eye and physically if you flip it upside down. So I like to employ a lot of, trouty things in my flies because that's what I learned to tie on, and I like fishing for trout. I'm not just a carp guy. So right? We've all done that before. No biggie. So I'm going to tie this in my same anal retentive way that I've tied several other things in. I'm not going to tie this in. I'm not going to just grab it and then keep going and nip it off and then go to the next phase after wrapping it. I want to make sure that we tie this in. Hackle feathers, I mean, I tell you right now, if you tie flies or you don't tie flies and you're watching this video because you want to tie flies, it's very easy to tie this in with a couple of wraps and then go to wrap it and pull it out. You're not going to tie it into where you can't pull it out. It's reasonable to say that we are strong enough that we're going to be able to pull this out. Our goal is to make sure that it's tied in there so when I pull on this to tie it with some force, that it doesn't give on me. Once this is tied in and cinched off, it's not going to come undone. It may break or something. I've never really had a hackle feather come undone like that. something. But as long as you tie it in and you wrap it well, you're golden. That's how it's going to work. So instead of just wrapping this bad boy in, like normally when I learned and I tied all my trout stuff, I would grab my feather like this, get back over here, and then I would just tie it in and move on. One in the front, one in the back, one here, and then I'd move it up and tie one there and move on. But there's another spot, another untied space in the equation. And once I realized that one night, I was like, holy cow, I can completely make this more durable with something that was already there. So stay with me here. So we're going to go over this one time. All right. So that's one wrap of thread in between both sides of that feather. If I lift up my tie-in point, now I'm on that side of this feather and the eyes. Jump back. And this is, again, you don't want to do it sequential because they can unwrap from each other. If you do one and then the other one and jump back, one over ties and ties in the other. So after tying in the front, now lift your hackle feather up and there's this lonely spot back there that we just have ignored for years. So bring your thread up, and now what you've done is you've provided thread with tension on the back, middle, and front of your hackle feather. Go ahead and clip off your extra. I'm going to do an inline cinch. Now, a lot of times, and because I was doing this slower and showing you, you'll see this when you do that, you cinch it, you'll see your feather lock in, which I thought was like the best thing because I visually saw that feather cinch and lock when I did my tension inline thread. So inline cinch. So there's definitely something there by that extra bound piece of thread on the other side of it. And then wrap this bad boy around. And if you want to use a little tool, feel free. If you want to just kind of get at it, that's what I'm going to do. I do pull it back when I wrap it around. I'm not too anal retentive on how I prep the actual feather when I want to wrap it, okay? I'm not going to preen all of them back and wrap it around because I am going to give this feather the okey doke once it's tied in, which is another reason that I was really looking for another way to be durable on that tie-in is because we're really going to work that hackle feather over. So check this out. I'm not going to just cinch this down pulling down. I mentioned before in other videos, in this video, I like to cinch in line and opposite of the tie-in point. So I tied this feather, or I cinched it to the hook shank on my side. So I want to finish pulling away from me and in line to where that tie-in point is. If I pull this way, I'm providing a 90 on this side of the hook shank, which is away from where I tied it in. If I tie this way, my tension now comes at a 90 where it was tied in. So now I'm literally that much closer to the tie-in on that cinch rather than deploying it off of the other edge. Potato, potato. And then I'm going to clip this bad boy off, our extra. And then I'm going to do a half hitch. And here's why. Because I don't want us coming untied when we spin our bug around. So you can use a brass brush, you can use whatever you want, Velcro, to get in on this. My personal a straggler. My personal preference with this specific situation, that being a dubbing that has rubber legs in it and a feather, I like the Velcro. The Velcro grabs through the feather to the rubber legs and really, really separates this feather and the oil on each of the barbels. I don't want this feather to do its job, being sheening water, right? This feather's on a bird. Its job is to let water sheen right off of it, right? It's going to lay that way and water's going to roll off. We don't want that. I need this to be erratic and to look individual, like something's not right or something is right. So if I just go in and let these feathers and just, give it once over with this brush, okay? It's not that they're not going to get roughed up. They will. You can look at them already and see that they're roughed up. But notice that they're roughed up the same direction. The brass doesn't grab the dubbing enough and tie it up enough to crinkle up all these barbels. I don't want any one of these feathers to have a buddy. Been to enough shows, right? widespread show, right? Dancing through the whole thing. You always got an elbow buddy. That's what you have, right? I don't want any of these feathers to have an elbow buddy for the whole show, because an elbow buddy means that they're a little too close together and they can act the same way. My goal is to have all of those feathers doing what they want to do independently, which means more vibrations, more life in the water, and possibly another maybe checked. So by taking my Velcro, I can really like get in and almost grind those feathers into that dubbing, back and forth, every single direction that you can get in there and do it, and really give it the once over, give it the business. So now when I bring this back, there's a noticeable difference of how these feathers look. They are completely disheveled, and that's what we want. We don't want these feathers to be acting how they're supposed to be act. We want to put them in a state of mind that's abstract of what they've been engineered to do by the big guy, which is to lay back, lay flat, and let water sheen off. So by separating them all, now water is going to hit all those feathers in a different way and push back. And then the best part about it is when you lay that over your body, you now get this mottled layer over the brown. And when you start putting in the darks of the natural black and white model over that, you start getting a really, really buggy exterior. And that's really what I like doing, is layering materials, not only for the vibration, big fan of that, because it has to move water and it has to attract a fish. But building by layering is big in fly tying. That's why I think getting out and just being a material hunter, looking for different things, trying different things. I have materials that I've used once and I won't go back to, but I don't know if I like it or I don't like it unless I try it, right? Get in there, try something different, try something that isn't supposed to be done the way it's supposed to be done, and see what comes up and see what happens. But by layering over the right contrasting model feather over this body that has different colors, all right, and different things happening, but overall, it's brown, it's brassy brown, you know, that's what it's gonna be, with hits and pops of one thing or the other. By putting in something that is completely dedicated and we know what it looks like from top to bottom until we do that. And now each one of those are gonna bring something individually different to that fly, because they're gonna lay differently and they're gonna be modeled and not perfect. This side's got some kind of going over here. These are laying down, you know. Bugs aren't perfect. So we want that hackle feather to have a life of its own, without a doubt. So yeah, let's tie in some touch dub and finish this bad boy up. Normally, the recipe does call for the squirrel fox from Wapsi, which is basically 100% guard hair, which is probably why I like it, because it's just, I don't know if the word buggy does it justice. I can't find another word that is buggier than buggy, but I love this stuff. However, it's difficult to locate nowadays in multiple packs. I'm not going to pay $5 shipping for one pack. So I'm a tyer. I come up with substitutions, other things that work. I would advise that when you do a substitution, think about what you're substituting and try and get something that's going to give you the same reaction or the same result. I've been in many bands, and I was always the one that thought, if we're going to do a cover song, we need to learn the cover song the way the artist wrote it and played it. And it's not until we know it frontwards, backwards, side to side, that we can make changes in that song, because only then do we really know the advantages or disadvantages of making changes to that song. And I would say the same thing with tying. You know, I didn't make any variations to Barry's carp fly or to Jay's backstabber until I could tie that fly how they tied it, frontwards to backwards. That way I knew what I could sub in, sub out, or change and have it still be within the context of what they designed. So absolutely, you can sub away. Just make sure that if you're grabbing a material, that's gonna give you what the material you're replacing gave you. So in this situation, I've got some Vicuña hare's ear sub, and the reason I grabbed this was because it's gonna give me the same level of bugginess. It's crazy buggy, and I get some translucency off this. So it's something a little different than I would get from the fox squirrel or the squirrel fox. I get translucency, which I love translucency because it brings a very bug-like feature to a fly. So this is the hare's ear sub from Vicuña. It's great. It's alpaca, 100% sustainable. I'm an ambassador for these guys for one of those reasons, because not only is it an unbelievable product, but because I know where my dubbing came from, because they post pictures of the alpacas on the farm when they get the alpaca fur. So I know the alpacas, not personally, but I know them and I know where it came from. I think that's kind of cool. I don't know the chicken or the rooster this came from. It was a pretty one, but these are kind of cool. So check it out. It's not going to hurt you tying. I'm going to do my touch dub with this because it is just so buggy, and then it's going to give me a little bit of translucency around the head of the fly. And we are going to do this touch dub like I've done every other touch dub. We are going to provide a nice sticky foundation of wax. We do want a nice amount of wax, but we don't want glops. That would be bad. That would be glops. We want to make sure that it's even and about 6 inches. I'm good with that. Now I'm better with that. All right. So when you grab the dubbing out of the bag, whatever it may be, right? Go ahead and kind of separate it to where it's kind of in its, whatever it touches, it's going to grab state. Okay. And I'm just going to take this now. And the whole object isn't to put all of the dubbing on. When you're touch dubbing, chances are that you're doing it to get the guard hair out of whatever you're doing. If I have beaver, I'm doing that because I want the guard hairs. If I'm doing the fox squirrel, it's all guard hair, right? So anytime you're touch dubbing, chances are you like guard hairs. So we're going to go through and we're just going to touch the dubbing to our wax, you know? And if you feel that there's not enough before you wrap it, go ahead and strip it down, take it off because it's only on there with a little bit of wax. Re-wax, and then maybe a little more wax would help with getting more on there. If you find yourself not getting it too sticky, that's what it is. It wasn't enough wax. If you find yourself going to wrap and you see a glop of wax on your fly, that would be too much wax. Wouldn't be a bad thing because the wax will be durable in a sense that once the cold water hits it, it actually seizes up and will actually be a level of durability for you on your fly, but not what we're looking for. All right, we're going to wrap this how we always wrap our touch dubs. And when I say always, we're going to fill some of this space up with a few perpendicular wraps, and then we're going to change our direction to behind the eye and kind of build up on it to where we kind of get a little bit of lift. So I'm going to take a few to kind of fill it in, and then I'm going to start working my way this way and filling. Now you see this right there? You want that. And on a touch dub, they're going to get wily because we're not spinning it on. The thread actually grabs all of that and ties it in. And that's how your touch dub is secured. So as I wrap that, right, so my thread there's in the middle, that wrap right there, I diagonally underneath came over to the inside of my eye. So I'm in the middle. This wrap is now actually coming this way. I'm spiraling slowly behind that eye. So when I come up behind the other eye, I am now literally, all my wrap tension is now this way, just wrapping around the eye. And then same thing, you're underneath, give it a couple wraps and we'll finish up in a second. Now you can totally see that we've built a translucent shoulder that's going to actually push water into a different type of material. Water is going to hit this differently, it's going to go through it differently, and then that vibration is going to stop and change when it hits the body. The reason I focus a lot on vibration is that carp, although I catch a lot of carp cruising and clooping and moving around, it's perceived that they're always on the bottom. They're not. They eat in all columns. However, they do eat quite a bit off the bottom. That being said, you gotta think about the fly that you're presenting them and how they're gonna see or feel that fly. So if their head's always down, or for the most part it's down, I would say take a 2-foot circle, 3 foot if you want to kind of give them a little more, right? Don't put it around the head of the fish. Put your circle around the fish. So if you were to wake up in the middle of the night, walk into your kitchen and get something to drink, you know where your coffee table is, you know where the end table is, you're not going to stub your toe, you know where all of that is. You can account for all of that because you know. As this carp ticks and tacks and he's eating, that circle that we've moved around that fish is going to move with that fish. If they can't see as well, they've got bad eyesight, they're really good from me to you, 6, maybe 8 feet, but after that it starts diminishing. So they're going to be reliant on their side and their gills. So that vertical line they have running on, they're tasting and feeling with different fins and barbels. That really is their zone defense to make sure that the coffee table is where it's supposed to be, that the dining room table is where it's supposed to be, that there's nothing in the way when they walk to get that beverage from the fridge. So if I put a fly somewhere in that zone that they know very well is cleared, and I have, okay? Soft landing fly like a wakame salad, I can slip this in to the zone. And as an angler, you're like, sweet, I'm in the zone. No, contrary. They've cleared this zone. So there's no way in the world that there's gonna be a bug there because they would have eaten it or moved on. So in their mind, because they can feel, smell, taste, they've got a zone that they're very confident in that they've cleared, you know? They know what's going on. So if they just happen to like turn within that window and I've got a bug sitting there that they know it wasn't there 2 seconds ago, they're out. And I'm gonna spook that fish more times than not. Am I gonna get some eats? Absolutely. There's always gonna be an esoteric situation where you're gonna get the eat and you're gonna tell yourself, I can't believe that he ate that. But for the most part, you wanna operate on the outside of that circle. So if I have a fly that's got different vibrations coming down the body as it falls on the outside of that circle, with a fish with bad vision, it's gonna sense vibration. That's what they're gonna do. When a bug or something moves, they feel that vibration. That's what's gonna attract that fish to go check things out. It's not because they saw something fall and they're thinking, I'm gonna go eat that. No, something vibrated. Something was like whatever else happens under the water, enough to go investigate. Now, at that point, it's up to us. Are we presenting that fly in a manner that is gonna elicit an eat, you know? And again, that comes down to like fishing a fly the way that bug was intended to be fished. This one here, you know, it's gonna get to the bottom. It is gonna absolutely be nudged and doing plumes of dirt. That's what I like about this right here, is because it's gonna be down there and that fish is gonna see something and you can do a micro twitch and just get a poof, a little cloud of dirt. And that's what that fish is gonna key on, because other bugs are gonna do that when they move. So it's not necessarily getting this bug to move. And I do this because I do little finger twitch strips. I don't strip like this. I put a GoPro in when I first started and watched my bugs. And what I thought this did wasn't what I thought it was doing. This little strip moved my bug inches. I want my bug to either bulldoze an inch or almost tumble. So by literally hitting my fly line with my thumb or my finger, I elicit a twitch strip or a micro twitch switch. It's tough to say. Micro twitch strip to where now my fly is now gonna push through the mud and create a cloud, or it's gonna tumble along like debris or food or a dead bug that looks like it's just pretty much easy pickings. So there's just different ways to present your fly and then to make sure that it's doing things that line up with what it's doing math-wise. So we're done. This bad boy's tied. We're gonna finish it up. Even though we know how durable we've wrapped this fly from the very beginning to this end, we're gonna do one more line of defense, and that's gonna be about a 1/2 inch or so of zap. So there it is. You can see right there, zap there to there. Now, this is something else that I brought over from the steelhead side and composite loops, was knowing how many wraps you get per 1/2 inch to inch of your thread, right? So I know that right there is gonna be 4 wraps. 1, 2, 3, 4. On that 4th coming back, my glue is now gone. You don't have to do that and you don't have to know that. But when I dive into other types of tying over the winter and I learn all these things that I didn't know about, I get to bring that information back and find out where I can use it in other types of flies, you know, which is kind of cool. One winter it was streamers, one winter it was composite dubbing loops, and not necessarily steelhead flies, but just the dubbing loops themselves, on how to build mass and how to control that weight and to shed that weight, but have this fly be alive. All these things kind of transfer down to making sure that we're building a fly that does what we want it to do and looks the way we want it to look. So yeah, 4 turns, just like a composite loop, it's good. We can literally, honestly, cut this right now and it's not gonna come undone. We all know the zap will hold. However, you can go ahead and put in a couple of half hitches and then, let's see here. I'm 50-50, by the way. So check this out. So you see that fray? you can prevent breaks, thread breaks, at any point in your time. If you're paying attention to your thread, that right there, now I'm on 140, so I know my thread's cool there. If this were 70, I would find a way to make extra wraps past that and then get to my knot or to my whip. This is just gonna it's gonna shred and bust open a small pattern and not be pretty. So if you go in slow, it'll all come out. If you go fast, it's gonna break and it's not gonna be pretty and you're gonna have a bearded fly. So that's it. Zap, some dry wraps, and we're done, you know? I would normally go back and like brush it, but it's already brushed and trimmed. This fly is ready to fish. If you are looking for a lighter version of this fly, this is a size 2. You can go down to a 4 and tie it with the small lead eyes, which will give you a little bit smaller profile. I do use the small eyes for my Stillwater applications. I have used this big on Stillwater, like it gets windy, unruly windy, and that's just, you gotta feel your fly. You know, you're gonna miss an eat if you don't. So I will go to a pretty heavy, I'll go to this fly, but normally my mediums are for the river, with a small amount of the time going to still, and then I'll tie the Detroit Mop City Junior with the smaller eyes, and kind of basically shrink everything down. Like everything's the same, but it's just a little smaller, you know? The tail, I'll tie in a little shorter. I'm still tapering it the same way. I will use less length in my dubbing, so as I set up my dubbing loop, I may space it out and look at how wide it is, and then go in and cut that in half and then line it up, so I actually have a shallower body on my dubbing loop, so it's not gonna have to go over. Less trimming in the end. But yeah, you can make this smaller or bigger. I will say this, that I was actually troubleshooting this for an order. The fly came about, someone wanted me to tie an order of mops for him. And I took a trip to Utah to fish with Gerald at Blackfoot Res. We drove up and spent a week there and camped and fished for carp that were minimum 20 pounds. And I had a couple of betas from this, and that's what we ended up hammering in the last few days was this fly. So it's a great big water fly, no question. It doesn't have to be necessarily just the river. So if you're you have reservoirs near you, it's a great big water fly. But it's silhouette based, and you can see that because of that hook, we're very much able to have an arc that you wouldn't have, because any other hook with a soft arc is gonna, by the time we get material on it, it's gonna almost straighten out a little bit, and we'll have the material providing us the bump. But because everything is now going down that hook, its natural state is gonna be a tapered end to a tapered end. And that's what I meant by tapered end, is we don't have these huge shoulders sitting up like we would like with a wakame salad, right? It's gonna be tapered to basically look like a bug. So I hope that I've given you a couple of tips here. This is the Detroit Mop City. You can get this bug next year, 2022. That's right, in a fly shop near you by way of Umpqua Feather Merchants. Hey, thanks for clicking on this video and watching me tie some flies. If you haven't watched the wakame salad video, it's out there. And if you have, appreciate you.